This tiny PC packs a 24-core processor, plenty of memory, up to 3 M.2 SSDs, and an NVIDIA GPU, making it super powerful. We have a ton to get into today, so let's get to it. Hey guys, this is Patrick from STH, and today we're gonna take a look at this Lenovo ThinkStation P3 Tiny Gen 2, which is a super powerful little workstation, and it feels like we're in throwback mode because we're doing a 1-liter Project Tiny Mini Micro PC on a sit-down set that we haven't had in a while. And if you don't know Project Tiny Mini Micro, we've been taking the 1-liter PCs from Lenovo, HP, and Dell, and really diving into how you use them, not just as a current PC, but also later in life. Now, hey guys, let's start out with some of the important bits, but also some of the obvious bits, right? First off, Lenovo sent us this unit so we could go and do the review. The second thing though, is that this is not the cheapest unit that we've reviewed. Now, in Project Tiny Mini Micro, years ago when we started it back during the pandemic era and all that kind of stuff, it was pretty common to be able to get a 1-liter PC for $200 to $300. But a new system always costs more. So Project Tiny Mini Micro, when we were looking at it, was really focused more at the older generation PCs, but now we're also looking at the new generation because we did most of the old ones. And so since I know we're gonna get comments about this, I wanna talk about a couple things up front. Like first off, yeah, this is a workstation class 1-liter PC. It's brand new. And so it is one that is going to cost a bit more than if you were to go get a, like 5-year-old 1-liter PC. The second thing is though, that it has a lot more features. And if you don't know why we do these new systems, it's also because this is new today. And so you may be in a environment at work where you use Lenovo PCs. And if you are, you may want to go and order this one today. And then maybe you're watching this video 5 years from now, which is certainly possible, and you're looking for a really cool system on the budget. I think this might actually end up being one of the ones that is going to be coveted and sought after in a few years. Well, with that, let's get to the hardware and show you all about the cool bits of this little P3 Tiny Gen 2. Okay, so first, let's look at the front of the system. Lenovo usually does a pretty good job with its front ports because we have a combo jack for audio, and then we have 2 USB Type A ports, and these are both 10 gigabit per second, so USB 3.2 Gen 2 ports. One of these is always on in terms of power, so if you wanted to charge something or keep something online that needs power even when the system is maybe off, that's the one that you'd use. Next, there's a USB-C port. Now this is not a Thunderbolt port. This is not a USB Type 4 port or something like that. Instead, it is a Type-C port, but it's only a 20 gigabit per second port. Also important is that this is a data only port. And as we move to the back, I just want to point out that the top of this thing, man, there are a ton of vents. I mean, this is barely a solid piece. I mean, I would say it's mostly vented. If you have been watching the Project Tiny Mini Micro for a long time, you know that like when we first started reviewing these systems, it was essentially these systems that all you could stack up no problem because, they have vents on the front. So it always just like, airflow just straight through the chassis. But nowadays you actually have to care about that. And if you do stack these up on top of one another, or if you stack something on top of the system, just know that there are big vents here. Those vents are for the cooling because we have a GPU in here. And so I just want to point out that, there's vents on the sides now, there's vents on the bottom, vents on the top. And so just to me, at least, it's one of those ones where it's definitely a change that we've seen over the years in this segment. But let's get to the back of the system and look at the ports because of course that's what you guys want to look at. Now, let's start talking about the ports over here. And this is Lenovo's rectangle power input for their laptop power brick. Now, there are definitely 2 ways to look at this thing, right? First off, you could look at this and say, Patrick, that is a giant power brick compared to the machine, which would definitely be true. But the other way to look at this is actually for a 330 watt power brick, it's not actually as big as you would think it would be, maybe if you have seen others in the market. Like we've definitely seen some power adapters that are about this big for like 180 watt adapter. So overall, pretty good in terms of size. Next to the power connector, we have a DisplayPort, which is DisplayPort 1.4. Then we have a USB Type A port, and you just see the SS here. This is only a 5 gigabit, so USB 3.2 Gen 1 port, and so it's not necessarily the fastest port by any means, but at least you get another Type A port. Next, you get an HDMI 2.1 port, and then you get an array of 3 more USB 3.2 Gen 2 10 gigabit per second ports that are all these Type A ports. And guys, I just want to point out 2 things really quickly here. First off, I love the fact that Lenovo does a great job of labeling all their ports. In fact, I wish every vendor did such a good job of labeling the ports, how fast they are and stuff, because you know what? If you've been using the system for like 2 years, you may not know that one port is a 10 gigabit per second, one's a 20 gigabit per second, and like 5 gigabit, and like, just having labels is nice. The other thing feels a little bit crazy though, but this is a 2025, 2026 generation system, and you have one USB Type-C port, and that's only a 20 gigabit per second port. There's no USB 4, there's no Thunderbolt, none of that built into the system. And I understand that's for lower costs and you can customize the system, But on the other hand, I just kind of feel like I want to see faster connectivity because there's so many fast peripherals these days. And especially if you look at what Apple does with having so many USB Type-C ports and also having a lot of those be Thunderbolt ports depending on their mini PCs. I mean, this feels like we have a lot of USB Type-A. It's just kind of, that's how I feel about this, just looking at this today, especially given the fact that we've been reviewing a ton of mini PCs over the years. And when we talk about things that also feel a little bit old, this also uses the Intel i219LM that we've seen for generations. And guys, let me just take a step back here, right? Two things. So first off, 1 gigabit feels really old today, right? It just feels like this should be 2.5 gig. And that's partly on Lenovo, but it's also a lot on Intel. Like Intel should be, making 2.5 gig controllers part of their solution. So that way Lenovo knows like that's the one we should use. And the reason that's important on a business system like this or a workstation like this is that we have Intel vPro. So we do have that remote management. And guys, vPro's been around for forever. It's not necessarily like IPMI in a server, but it does provide some remote manageability features that I think a lot of folks will want, especially if you're a large IT for enterprise, or if you are just building a little lab out of these and you want something that's useful to go and do some level of remote management. vPro, I guess, is that avenue. But at the same time, I want 2.5 gig Ethernet. And guys, I know I'm saying that, and half of you are gonna be like, why 2.5? Why not 10 or something like that? And I get it, but at least built in 2.5, that's what I want. And one of the options in the system is that you can get different types of networking. There's, I think, both Intel i350, which is another 1 gig, but you can get up to, I think, like 4 ports with that. I think there's a T2 and a T4 version, so you can get up to 4 ports. The other thing you can get is a Broadcom-based solution, so I think you can get like 2 or 4 ports in Broadcom as well. And I think there's also a version that you can get with a Realtek 2.5 gig NIC. We just don't have any of those options here. And so I'll just leave it at that a lot of folks do add their own networking in here, and there are options to go and upgrade, especially if you want to. And frankly, I can understand why somebody would want to do that because I've definitely thought about doing it on several occasions. And I just want to point out that if you don't have the GPU installed in here, you do get punch-out ports that we've seen previously, and those punch-out ports can have a number of different configuration options. For example, you can get more USB Type-A, but you can also get Type-C. You can get Thunderbolt 4 ports. You can get display ports, HDMI ports, serial ports. Like there's all kinds of different things. I'll let you guys go look up all the different options, either on the configurator or on the specs. But I just want to point out that we have a pretty specific configuration because we do have a pretty nice NVIDIA GPU in here. And on the back, you can see that we have those 4 mini DisplayPort outputs. Let's get inside just so you can kind of see what that looks like. Now, like previous generations, you just pop this little sucker off and you get this top off. If you can't tell, this is pretty easy to get off, and I really like Lenovo's design overall. And so here's what the system looks like. And on the bottom here, you're gonna see that we have our NVIDIA RTX A1000 GPU, which is an 8 gigabyte GPU. I think it's only like 50 watt TDP, so it's a relatively low power GPU. Something that is important is that we have a cooler that's designed for this chassis. You can see a kind of neat little heatsink design here and all kinds of cool stuff. And you'll see that we have a little PCIe slot that this goes into. I know a lot of folks upgrade these with something that's not from the factory. And one thing you do have to contend with is that this backplate here, an IO plate, is not a standard one. It's not just like a low profile slot. It's a custom one that's for the system. So I know that there are a lot of folks on the STH forums and what have you that will go and 3D custom print little brackets for this if you can't find the real one. And under the GPU, you'll see that we have our Intel BE200. So it's a Wi-Fi 7 solution, which is pretty darn good. The other thing though that is a little different in this generation is, let me just go and pop this heatsink off here and fan off. And one of the things is super easy to service. You just pop this little heatsink and fan off. And then under here, this is where our Intel Core Ultra 9 CPUs, and this is a 285, so it's not a 285K or an HX or any of those, but it's a relatively fast processor that gives us 8 performance cores and 16 efficient cores. And if you're ordering this with a different SKU, there is a T SKU, which is the lower power SKU, which I usually like actually in these small form factor systems. There are also options for lower end CPUs, and for example, like you can get the Core Ultra 5 series and lower, but one of the challenges with that is that I think you need a 235 is kind of like the minimum to be able to also get vPro. Anything below that, you can't get vPro in. And whether you're ordering from Lenovo directly, or maybe you're buying this in a couple years and you just want to know, does your system have vPro or not? One really good telltale sign is if you can get a picture with this sticker. The vPro Enterprise is actually on here. If you have a system that is enabled with vPro, you'll get a little vPro enabled sticker as part of the branding. And under here, you're going to see another feature that I'm super jazzed about, guys. This is another NVMe slot. And I'm excited for that NVMe slot because it's actually the third slot, or one of 3 slots that we have. Now, let's go put this back in. And by the way, Lenovo has, I mean, this is just so easy, no tools, very easy to get in and out. I love this fan unit and shroud. Like, this is great, guys. One of the best ones by far in the industry. And the other thing that Lenovo does that I think is also one of the best things in the industry is it has this back plate here. So you'll see the back plate and you just kind of pop it off. And when you pop it off, now you have access to even more components. The things that you'll see on the back here is that we have the spots for memory. You're gonna notice that we only have one SODIMM installed in here, and there are different types of SODIMMs. You can have just normal SODIMMs, or you can use the C SODIMMs and get up to DDR5 6400 speeds if you can afford it, because memory prices have been going absolutely nuts lately. That's just what it is. The other thing though is that we also get 2 more NVMe storage slots down here. And so one nice thing about the Lenovo design is that you don't have to like open up the entire system up here, and you can just open up this back panel and you get access to all of, or a lot of the components that you would want to service, right? Like the big things, the NVMe SSDs, the memory, those are things that you definitely would want to upgrade. And then if you do want to get to the other one that's on this side, well, you know, you just pop off the shroud and you're set. With that, let's put it back together and talk a little bit about the performance. And I'll just show you some Geekbench results. Overall, the system is pretty fast, and it's definitely faster than previous generations. I think Intel did a good job with the Core Ultra 9 Gen 2 series. And frankly, I think though, I would just say this. We got this from Lenovo with the 285. I probably would order this if it were me, just with the 285T, just because I've such a long history with these systems and I love the T SKUs in general. But that's just a configuration thing that you can definitely configure and look for later. I will say though, that the other thing that is really interesting in this is the NVIDIA RTX A1000 GPU. Now there are 2 different options that you can get. You can get that, which is a high option. Then there's the lower option, which is an A400. The A400 is the 4GB of GDDR6 memory, whereas the 8GB model, that's the A1000. And frankly, I think for a lot of folks that are buying this, maybe because they want to have some of that local AI model stuff, I do think that the 8GB is just way better, right? Like just frankly, a 4GB GPU, I think I struggle with how useful that is in terms of running models, because just 4GB is not a common optimization point. Let me also just kind of talk a little bit about the MLPerf results that we did, because we went and ran this against MLPerf Client V1.5, which is an industry standard benchmark that can test pretty much everything here. And that includes not just the NVIDIA GPU, but also the integrated GPU, as well as the NPU. The NPU kind of feels like a bummer these days, right? I mean, frankly, a lot of folks are really focused on GPU compute instead of the NPU compute, but it is here. And I do understand that there are folks in the Windows ecosystem and other ecosystems that are using it and are able to go and offload from the GPU and CPU and get that offload happening. So therefore you do get more compute resources. And that might bring me to the next thing that I found really interesting about this, especially when we're going over all of these MLPerf results, right? There are just so many different ways that you can run these things because there are so many accelerators. Just think about it. We have the CPU cores, which have been around there for a long time, but we have P cores and E cores. We do not get hyperthreading in this generation, especially for folks that are doing virtualization. I know most folks are going to want those extra hyperthread cores because that gives them more vCPUs. But on the other hand, you know, this is at least an interesting option because those P cores are pretty darn fast and the E cores have gotten a lot better. The other thing though is that you will see that there's more to it because we have the integrated GPU that comes on the package, which means that we also get things like quick sync video. We have that NPU. We also have the NVIDIA GPU, which means that not only do we get the NVIDIA GPU for, you know, you can do CAD applications, heck, you can probably play games on it. You can do AI on here. And if you really want to, you could also use the NV encoders and decoders from the Ampere generation and get more video transcoding performance. And so for a lot of folks, that could be important as well. And guys, I look back to like when we started doing Project Tiny Mini Micro, where you got like 4 P cores, they had hyperthreading, so 8 threads, 4 cores. They were a lot slower than what we have today. And then the other thing is we had maybe built-in video, so maybe you got an older generation of QuickSync. But like now, guys, the onboard GPU is actually pretty good compared to what it used to be. The encoders and decoders have all gone up. You have GPUs, you have the NPU. I mean, there's just so much packed into the system that I kind of think that even though the form factor is largely the same, you just get so much more processing, but different types of processing power too, which is just kind of an interesting evolution because we've been doing these systems for so long. Okay, guys, let's talk a little bit about the power consumption and noise. And we have this hooked up to a power meter over here. Guys, it's jumping around a lot. I'll just tell you, we saw lows somewhere in about the 29 watt range at idle, and then it jumped jumps up and it sometimes is sitting at like 34, 36 watts. Now it's, jumping up to like 46. I'm just watching it. Now it's back down to like 37. And, the fact of the matter is this is not a sub 10 watt idle thing. And the reason for that is also just because we have that NVIDIA GPU, right? That's one of the big reasons for that. And so if we didn't have that, I would expect that this would be a much lower idle power system. But at the same time, 36 watts is quite a bit. The original systems that we would look at Project Tiny Mini Micro were like, maximum you'd get up to like maybe 70, 80 watts or something like that, right? So it feels like a lot. But let's go talk about what happens when we start talking about the noise. So right now, sitting here, it's at about 37, 38 dBA in our 34 dBA noise floor studio. And frankly, guys, at idle, I think this is absolutely great. It's not loud at all. And I have absolutely no problem with this sitting on my desk. In fact, it was sitting on my desk and I forgot it was sitting on my desk and until somebody told me that that's where it was so I can come and film this. So it's just something to kind of keep in mind. It's not a very loud system, but let's talk a little bit about what happens when we put a load on it. And guys, I'm looking at this right now and we're at like 235 to 240 watts. Okay, now we drop down to about 185 watts and it looks like it's sitting right there. This thing is definitely pretty loud. I can tell you it is putting out some warm air for sure, guys. And I think there might even be a little bit more that we could get this to go up if we push the GPU a little bit harder. And so I'll just say that, gone are the days of these things being like 80 to 100 watts. We are closer to like twice that, right? And if you can hear it over me, this is a 45 dBA at 1 meter just right now. It might even go up a little bit from that. So it is certainly far from a silent system. And hey guys, with all these videos, I like to have key lessons learned. Like, what do we learn from this video? To me, the big one is of course the fact that we get so much performance, so much acceleration, all in a little 1 liter package. You may not know this, but Lenovo has a number of mounting options for these little 1 liter PCs. That includes even tiny-in-one monitors, as long as it can support this high of a TDP and the power supply can. So having all of this performance in that 1 liter PC is pretty awesome. I also want to just point out that if you're looking at the Lenovo site and you're like, oh my gosh, these are so expensive, just remember that with all of the large OEMs, the like 99% or some crazy number of purchases actually happen through like corporations that have discounts that are based off of like list price. So that's not actually what, enterprises are paying. And then also if you're getting a secondhand used, just know that, it'll be probably less than you would get it on the website for. Now, of course, guys, something that has changed since we started doing Project Tiny Mini Micro is that the mini PCs have gotten way better and have way more features. But on the other hand, I will just say that something like this Lenovo is important because if you want to get next business day on-site warranty and support for years, you can do that with this. Whereas, if you have a random mini PC vendor, odds are you're gonna be lucky if you get a BIOS update every once in a while, right? So to me, at least, that's one of the benefits of getting something from a large OEM like Lenovo over some of the smaller mini PC vendors. And that's why Project Tiny Mini Micro is still very relevant. But guys, I'd love to hear what you think, so let me know down in the comments. Also, if you like this video, well, why don't you share it with your friends and colleagues, but also give it a like, click subscribe, and turn on those notifications so you can see whenever we come out with great new videos. As always, thanks for watching. Have an awesome day.